All right, so in this video, we're going to be talking about how you can solve a quadratic equation using a method other than graphing or using a calculator. So here we have two examples. Both are quadratic equations and both are set equal to zero. And being set equal to zero is a key part in solving a quadratic equation. So if the equation is not equal to zero on the right side, then what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to find a way to make it equal to zero. These are both already ready to go. This one on the left, we can use methods that you would have used in a linear algebra class. And that method would be to get x isolated or get x squared isolated. And to do that, we would take the 25 and we would probably try to move that to the right side. So we would add that over. Okay, that's going to give us x squared equals 25. And then the only thing we have to figure out how to get rid of is a power of 2. And if you're familiar with the power of 2, you might know that to undo a power of 2, you would have to do a square root. So that's why we call a power of 2 a squared, because a square root is what undoes a power of 2. So in this case, we could square root both sides of this equation. Okay, and that would actually leave us with x, which is solved, right? And so our answer is going to be whatever the square root of 25 is. In this case, the square root of 25 is 5. But you also have to remember there's another answer that also works for the square root of 25. Our brains have been ingrained to say it's positive 5. But thinking about what square root means, square root means what can I multiply by itself to get 25? You can multiply 5 times 5, but you can also multiply negative 5 times negative 5. That would also equal 25. So from now on, when you square root a number, we have to assume that either of them could be true. Could be a positive number or it could be a negative number. So sometimes you'll see a little plus minus sign. I don't know if you've ever seen that with a plus on top, minus on bottom. So if you see that plus minus, it just means both positive and negative. So you could see this answer written as x equals 5 or x equals plus or minus 5, or you can see x equals 5 comma negative 5. Either way would be good. All right, so those are good answers. If I plug either 5 or negative 5 in for x, they should both work in this case. So you probably could have done that on your own, right? You get to the right side, and you'll have a problem. And your problem is you can't combine the x's together to make them into one term, right? To have a power of 2, so you can square it both sides. You can't do that over here because you have an x squared, and then you also have something that has just an x in it. Those aren't like terms. They can't be combined together. So, up until now, we would be stuck. But we're going to move on here, and we're going to go over a way that we can somehow get those x's together. And we're going to use what we call the zero product property. And the zero product property is actually exactly what it's called. Zero. Product means multiply, and it's a property that tells us that we can multiply things to get 0. And it says that in order to multiply two numbers together that are equal to 0, at least one of them has to be 0. All right, so here we got an example, something times something equals 0. You are certain that either this number is 0 or this number is 0. And that has to be true. There's no other way to multiply to get 0. So let's say if this is a 9, right, we then know this number has to be 0. And then same thing. If the first number, let's say the second number is anything, so 8, I don't know, negative 8, whatever. In order to multiply to get 0, this one would have to be 0. So if you see equals to 0 on the right side, if you have two things multiplied together, one or both of them have to be the number 0. And that's what we're going to use to solve quadratic equations. And we're going to solve by using the factoring method. So here's your steps. So I'm going to copy down these. In solving a quadratic equation, the first thing is move all terms to the left side. And we are doing that so that we get a 0 on the right. All right, we want to use the zero product property, so we want to make things equal to 0. So we can use that property. 2, factor the left side of the equation. So we're going to factor this. So what numbers can multiply to 4 and add to 4? That's a pretty easy one. That's a 2 and a 2. All right, so we just factored the left side, so we didn't change the right side. The right side still is equal to 0. Left side is now factored. Step 3 says set each factor equal to 0. So why would we do that? Well, again, zero product property says if I have two things multiplied together and they're equal to 0, one or both of them are 0. So we have two things, they're just factors now. All right, so this is a number, right? Once I substitute a value of x in here, this is just some number multiplied by some number has to be 0. So I know that either this first factor, which is x plus 2, either that is 0 or this one is 0. And to be honest, they're exactly the same thing, so there's really no sense in doing this twice, but you would solve these equations then. So I would say, okay, what value would make this 0? So subtract 2 from both sides, and we would get x equals -2. All right. So one of our solutions would be -2, and then if I solve this one, you'll see I'll also get another -2. All right. If they're the same number, you don't have to write them twice. This one just has one solution, and it's at the number -2. And so if you check that, plug a -2 in for x, -2 squared is 4. 4 times -2 is -8. All right, and we do get 0. Okay, so that does actually work. All right, so again, move everything to the left side. Make sure you get a 0 on the right. You're going to factor what you have. Once you factor it, you're going to set each factor equal to 0 and make yourself two equations. And then you're going to get your solutions from those two equations. All right. So let's go ahead and do an example here. So we got a 0 on the right-hand side already. So our step 1 is done. Step 2 is let's go ahead and factor this thing. So what multiplies to 20 and adds to a 9? Let's see, that's going to be a 4 and a 5. All right, 4 times 5 is 20. 4 plus 5 is also 9. So that is exactly what we want to factor. And then we're going to use our zero product property. That says if I multiply two things together and they're equal to 0, one or both of these things have to be 0. So I'm going to say, okay, the first factor, x plus 4, could be 0. Or x plus 5, which is the second factor, it could be 0. All right. And then I'm just going to solve both these equations. So I just have to subtract 4 from both sides here. So we get -4. And I'm going to subtract a 5 from here. And that's going to get me a -5. So both of those numbers, if plugged in for x, should make this thing 0. And so they're both solutions. You do have to be careful if you are checking your work. For example, if I wanted to check the number -4, make sure it works, I'm going to go ahead and plug that in for x. But in a calculator, especially the TI-83s and 84s, you've got to make sure to put parentheses around your number when you substitute it into the equation. So here I'm substituting a -4 in to the original equation. I'm just checking to see if this is a solution. All right, so -4 squared is a positive 16. So that's where your calculator will make a mistake if you do not put parentheses in there. 9 times -4 is -36. All right, and 20 is 20. And this is true. 16 minus 36 plus 20 is actually 0. So that works. I'm not going to check this other solution, but you could. It should work as well. All right, so that is the idea of solving by factoring. Do it one more time here quick. All right, factors of -30 add to -7. One's positive, one's negative. What are they? 10 and 3. All right, so those are the two numbers that multiply to -30 and add to -7. And then, again, use your zero product property. Set each factor equal to 0. There's one equation. And then my other factor, make it equal to 0. And you have two solutions. From this one, when I add 10 to both sides, I'll get a 10 as a solution. And this one, when I subtract a 3 from both sides, I will get a -3 as a solution. All right, both are good. And if you want to, it's always good practice to check your work, plug your numbers back in for x, make sure they are solutions. All right, let's do we have any? Oh, wait, let's go back. All right, so this one's got an extra step in it because we don't have equals to 0 on the right side. Get that out of the way. We don't have equals to 0 over here, so we have to have that to solve by factoring. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the 28 and we're going to add it to both sides to move it back to the left. So I just added 28 to both sides. Now I have a 0 on the right-hand side. Now you want to go through with your factoring. So x plus 4, x plus 7. And then your solutions, again, when you set this equal to 0, x plus 4 equals 0. And you solve that, you're going to subtract the 4 to the other side. So there's negative 4 as a solution. And then this is x plus 7 equals 0. Subtract 7 from both sides, and you'll get a negative 7 as a solution. All right, I wanted to do a slide and divide. Do I have one? Find all roots. What should you do if it's prime? Ugh. That's a good question. All right. This one. You try to divide out a GCF first. You don't have one, so we're going to do slide and divide. This will be the last one we do here. Let's go ahead and multiply 6 times negative 1. That's going to get you a negative 6. Okay, so now we are looking for factors of negative 6 that add to positive 1. All right, so what are those? That would be, let's see, a positive 3 and a negative 2. All right, so that's the slide part. Now we're going to divide, so we got to divide our numbers by a, which in this case is a 6. Next step is to completely simplify fractions. So 3 over 6 is the same as 1 over 2. And 2 over 6 is the same as 1 over 3. And then the last thing is to bring your bottoms up. So if you have denominators still, bring them to the top of your factors. All right, and we just did our slide and divide. So we did all that work to factor. So what did that equal? 2x plus 1 and a 3x minus 1. All right, so now that we've got this factored, we're going to go ahead and set each factor equal to 0, and we have 2 little equations to solve here. So 2x plus 1 is 0, and also 3x minus 1 is 0. So you solve each of these, subtract the 1 from both sides, and then divide both sides by a 2, and you get negative a half. Sorry, this handwriting is terrible. And then you're going to add 1 to both sides here, and then divide by 3. It looks like we get a 1/3. So those are your 2 solutions. All right, and that's how you would solve using the slide and divide method. All right, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe to my YouTube channel.